Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Live from the Trevor Zoo. It's great to welcome you here, even if you can't be here in person, and a reminder that we'll continue to do these broadcasts every Wednesday at 4 p.m. My name's Jessica. I'm the Director of Programs, and I started in 2005. I've always been passionate about the environment and the planet and education, and that's what brought me to the Trevor Zoo and what has kept me here for the last 15 years. My job is about managing all the people aspects of the zoo. So that includes managing the staff, the volunteer program, and the education program. And so today I'm excited to share our white-naped cranes with you, and we'll talk a little bit about them now. The white-naped cranes are one of our 10 endangered species, and we have 4 here that live at the Trevor Zoo. They're an elegant bird species that are native to northern Mongolia, southern Siberia, Korea, Japan, and central China. Cranes are the tallest of all flying birds and are found on every continent except Antarctica and South America. Just a reminder to feel free to ask questions throughout today's episode and just to type them into the comments and we'll answer them toward the end of the show. So here at the Trevor Zoo, we currently have 2 sets of white-naped cranes. Sprick and Sprock live on our pond, and Essie and Robeson live in our Asia exhibit. Over the years, there have been a number of cranes at the zoo. In fact, we've had white-naped cranes at the zoo since March of 1983. At that time, we received 2 female cranes from the International Crane Foundation in Wisconsin. One of them was named Granny, and the other was named Betty. They were joined by a male who came from the Bronx Zoo in November of 1983. This was the beginning of our participation in the white-naped crane conservation program. Now our current cranes on the pond, we have Sprock, our male, and he was born on June 29th, 1979 at the Bronx Zoo. That makes him 41 years old this month. He came to us from the Smithsonian National Zoological Park in Virginia in 2007 after he had been to a number of other zoos previously. Sprick, who is his mate, was born on April 8th, 2003 and came from the Bronx Zoo in 2004. Robeson, our male on exhibit in our Asia exhibit, was also born at the Bronx Zoo in June 2015, and Essie, his mate, was born in May 2015 at the Smithsonian National Zoological Park. Both Robeson and Essie arrived here in April of 2016, and so they are both turning 5 this spring. And here we have some facts about white-naped cranes. The elegant white-naped crane is the only crane species with pinkish legs and a dark gray and white striped neck. The bird's back of the neck, or nape, and the top of the head are white. Its eyes are surrounded by a red face patch. Adult plumage is dark gray and wings are silver gray. Males and females are virtually indistinguishable, although in breeding pairs, males tend to be slightly larger in size than females. Juvenile white-naped cranes have a brown head and pale throat. They're a large bird, 44 to 49 inches long, approximately 4.3 feet tall, and weighs approximately 5.6 kilograms or about 12 pounds. Their wingspan is 5 to 7 feet in length. White-naped cranes are native to northern Mongolia, southern Siberia, Korea, Japan, and central China, and are found in grassy marshes, wet sedge meadows, and reed beds in broad river valleys, lake depressions, and boggy upland wetlands. They prefer areas where their nests can be concealed and there is little grazing pressure. In winter, white-naped cranes frequent freshwater lakes, farmland, and occasional coastal flats. In many portions of its breeding and winter range, the white-naped crane is regularly found in the company of other cranes. Estimates range from 5,000 to 7,000 white-naped cranes that remain in the wild. Since 1994, AZA institutions like the Trevor Zoo have been sending surplus white-naped crane eggs to Russia to be reared and released to the wild. Currently, the International Crane Foundation is also involved in conservation of the white-naped cranes throughout their range in eastern Asia. The biologists in King's-Gansky Nature Reserve in Russia hand-rear the chicks and release them to the wild in their second year. White-naped cranes are omnivorous. They are proficient diggers, excavating the tubers of several species of sedges and feeding on plant matter, such as seeds, roots, and tubers of aquatic plants. They also eat insects, small vertebrates, such as amphibians and rodents. Outside of the breeding season, white-naped cranes consume more grains, seeds, and tubers. White-naped cranes have a penetrating call. Mated pairs of cranes engage in unison calling, which is a complex and extended series of coordinated calls. The birds stand in a specific posture, usually with their heads thrown back and beaks skyward during the display. Female white-naped cranes initiate the display and utter 2 calls for each male call. The male always lifts his wings over his back during the unison call, while the female keeps her wings folded at her sides. The white-naped crane's breeding season is in spring from April to June. Nests are mounds of dried sedges and grasses in open wetlands. Females usually lay 2 eggs at 2 to 3 days apart, and both the male and the female take turns sitting on the eggs. Incubation lasts 28 to 32 days. Both parent birds take part in the building of the nest, incubating the eggs, and also rearing the chicks. The male takes the primary role in defending the nest against possible danger. White-naped crane chicks are yellow-brown with some dark spots. They are fed by both parents and fledge about 70 to 75 days after hatching. Young birds are sexually mature at 2 to 3 years of age. The lifespan in the wild is unknown. In human care, the median age of both males and female white-naped cranes is 15 years. The oldest known crane in the managed population lived to be 45 years old. Okay, so now let's show you our crane exhibit and how we care for them. All right, let's go see our cranes. This way is where we keep their food. I'm gonna go behind the staff gate here. You'll see we have a few Canada geese and wild mallards here. Some of the Canada geese are wild and some were rehab animals. You can see this one here. We call it angel wing. It's actually a byproduct of feeding geese too much bread and food that's not very nutritious for them when they're young. So it's actually better not to feed the geese, which a lot of people like to do when they're babies. So in this building, we have a bucket of food right here. It's called Game and Turkey. And I'm going to get a few scoops. Depending on the time of the year, we're going to feed them different amounts. In the winter, we're going to give these animals more feedings during the day and give them more food because they need more calories to keep warm. And then in the summer, we can give them less food because they're eating some of the food in the pond. Oh, here's a Muscovy duck right there. Giving us a little fan of the feathers. And then all these mallards. Oh, and look, there's some baby mallards right there too. This happens as well. So the pond is open to any wild bird that wants to come in. So we do see wild mallards and these geese that come in as well. Many of our geese were born here or were rehab animals, so they're very friendly. And I think we have a crane out here this morning, which is great. Sometimes they come back up a little bit later in the day. That's why we put food in this hopper. That's our female, Sprick. She's gonna hop around and kind of keep the mallards away. So I'm gonna first throw out some food. It gets everybody active and eating, keeps everybody happy. Kind of do a broad cast here so then everyone gets a little bit. Oh my gosh, those baby mallards are really cute. Up, and then we have our Muscovy ducks come in and fly over. They're very friendly. A lot of them like to eat right out of your hand when we feed them. And they're certainly not afraid of visitors when you come to the zoo. All right, and then we want to make sure to put some food in this, we call this a hopper, in here for the cranes. And it allows them some food where they can pick at it throughout the day. And then it also keeps it up higher, so then they don't have to fight for it with the other ducks. So this this crane right here, sorry, is our female, Sprick, and she is 17 years old. And you can see she is grabbing some of that game and turkey grain there. In the wild, well, here is a pretty wild exhibit on our wetlands here on this, in this environment. These guys have a great natural exhibit, and so they actually will fish for crustaceans and worms and insects, but then they'll also eat some plant tubers, and here we do feed them the game and turkey as well. You can see that the cranes have this grayish color, and right now her feathers look a little mangled because she's molting, which all birds do twice a year. They molt in the spring and in the fall, so they get new fresh feathers, and the feathers in the spring will help them to get rid of all that old insulating feathers, and then they'll pull in the new ones that grow, and then they do the same in the winter to help them get their fluffy down feathers. And so she looks a little tethered right now, but she will pull those out and as she gets in her new feathers and look a little bit prettier in the next few weeks. Our male's name is Sprock. I don't see him here right now, but I hear him. He is making a call, so they're communicating, Sprick and Sprock here, and our male is 40 years old, almost 41. In June, he'll be 41 years old. And cranes can live into their 50s, so that's still not too old, but he's quite a bit older than Sprick. You can see a wild mallard flying off there. I'm gonna go bring the remainder of this to our other feeder, which sometimes the cranes go and eat at, but then also our whooper swan and our, I see him over here, and our Canada geese will sometimes come over. We do have one snow goose. She's right there she's partnered with a Canada goose, and they also come down and use this feeder as well. Hi, Sven. Come on, buddy. Come on. Hi. I think he needs to go in here, so I'm going to try to see if I can. Come on, buddy. I don't know if he can duck under that one. Come on, I'm going to give you some food. Go under. Okay, he can. Go under. He's a big bird. All right, buddy, come on. I have some food for you. So right over here is another shared feeder, and this just helps us to have food in several places for all the animals. Oh, and this is great. On the pond, I see some common mergansers as well. So this is a great habitat for a lot of waterfowl. And we do see mergansers and sometimes redheads that stop in. We have kingfishers here on the pond that fish, and a lot of mallards and some Canada geese. So it's a really great environment, lots of space for a lot of different wild birds and the ones that we house here. And you may ask why the cranes don't fly away. It's because they're pinioned. So that means that their wings were clipped when they were really young, so that their feathers never grow on the very tip of their wing, so they cannot fly out. So the birds that stay here year-round are pinioned, and that keeps them here. And now I'm going to go bring this bucket back. And now we're going to go see our cranes in the Asia exhibit. So the white-naped cranes are one of our 10 endangered species here at the Trevor Zoo. And we have the pair on the pond that I just showed you. And then there is also a pair here in the Asia exhibit. So I'm gonna go in this door here, and we may see some other animals because our Asia exhibit has some muntjacs and sika deer, as well as the cranes. And I'm just gonna go get all of the things I need to care for them in this barn. They have game and turkey in this barn as well, just like the pond cranes. And they do not have a wetland to feed from, so we have to clean their water. And I have some snacks for them as well here. Today they are getting apple chunks and lettuce, and actually under here are some mealworms as well. Like I said earlier, they do like a lot of insects, so we'll go in through here. I see one of them right there, straight ahead. Oh, there's a muntjac. Oh, there's the other crane. So this exhibit is quite expansive, and cranes are startled by something, so they're walking away, but you will see areas in the exhibit where they are digging. So they get a lot of insects in the ground here, and here we'll come over here and I'll show you one of their spaces where they're really digging right along here, and they root through there. They probably get some tubers from the grasses. That is a natural thing that they would eat in the wild. And then they're also getting any insects that they can find there. So this pair is, they're both 4 years old, and cranes are monogamous, so they are going to mate for life unless something happens to one of them where one dies. So we have Robeson and Essie here. Robeson came from the Bronx Zoo, and Essie came from the National Zoo Smithsonian Institute, where they breed cranes. And so they were brought here a couple of years ago, and it takes a couple of years for them to become a mated pair, bonded pair, I guess. So they have actually this year started to show a lot of breeding signs. They do a dance, and they do a lot of vocalizations to confirm that pair bond, and we've seen a lot more of that this year. There are also a few spots in the exhibit where they have put some nesting material and made scrapes on the ground. It's nothing elaborate, but they put some reeds and dig up the ground a little bit, some feathers, and then they're gonna lay their eggs there. We haven't seen any eggs yet, but we hope that in the future maybe we will. They are still young, so if they live up to 50 years, you can imagine that they don't usually have babies right away in the first couple years. Let me put some of this food around. Same thing as the other cranes, we have a hopper. This one's up high so that other animals can't get the food. And close that. And then we have a waterer over here. And actually, if you look at it, you are going to see how dirty it is, and that actually shows you that the cranes were digging in the ground. They have all that dirt on their beak, and I have a muntjac that's going to try to take the crane food. They like the apples and the lettuce as well. Not so much the mealworms, but I'm going to clean this, give it a good scrub, and then I'm going to actually do a rinse because they made it very dirty. And we clean these waterers twice a day. And this is an automatic waterer, which makes the keepers' lives a lot easier. We don't have to bring buckets of water out here. There's a water line that is fed right into there, and there's a weighted system so that when you put the water in and you turn the valve on, it automatically fills. So when the animals are thirsty, they drink the water, and then it will refill automatically for them, which is a really great innovation that I'm sure all farmers and zookeepers appreciate. And then that snaps on. So here's Robeson right here. I'm gonna see if I can get him a little closer. Oh, and there's Essie who just ran over. That looked a little bit like a communication behavior there. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you may see them look at each other. It's a windy day today, so they're looking up a lot. And they get their name white-naped crane because of that white nape on their neck. They have no feathers on their face, but they have that red eye, and that's how you can tell a white-naped crane from other cranes. They have that beautiful gray body and then the white tips of their feathers, and these long legs that help them to wade in the wetlands. So they're actually not native to the United States. They're native to the area of China, Mongolia, and southern Russia, and they will breed into the areas of Japan and Korea. So a similar latitude, so they are fine in the winter here, but they would be in those wetland areas, so those long legs do help them. I'm going to see if I can toss a little bit of food to them and see if they'll come over. Maybe over here is a little better. You can see in the background there's a tub here. We do set up this tub so that they can play a little bit in the water, and then we can throw some food in there as well. So as soon as I walk away a little bit, I think that they will come over. They are a little cautious sometimes, and I think the windy day is also making them look around a little bit because there's a lot of movement in the air. So these guys look like they've already preened those feathers. Their feathers look nice and smooth, and so they've molted already. And you may see any bird really using their beak to sort of fix their feathers, almost like a combing, and they do that for a few reasons. One, to help when they're molting to pull out those old feathers. Sometimes it's to help remove insects that might be on their wings and on their bodies, but also it is to weatherproof them. So you might wonder how animals survive in all this weather, and birds have a gland, and they rub their beak on that gland and then rub that over their feather, which makes them waterproof. And so that's really helpful with rainy weather and keeps them nice and dry and therefore warm. So that's really great. We'll walk over here and we'll see if we can see what their little nest area looked like. The grass is starting to grow here, so it's a little harder to see now, but there's they dug up the ground a little bit, and then you can see they took a few of the sticks that we offered them, a little bit of hay, and then there are a couple of feathers there. And this is what a white-naped crane nest would look like. And so nothing elaborate, not like some of our songbird nests that can have moss and mud and all sorts of things. This is pretty basic. And the pair would switch off who would sit on the eggs. So sometimes the male would, and then let the female forage and then switch. So they do both care for the young. And these guys are, like I said, are young. They're only 4, so they're going to probably take a little bit of time to breed, and hopefully they will have eggs in the future. Sprick and Sprock have had eggs in the past. They are an older, more mature pair, but they have not had any viable young, so likely someone is infertile, but we do see them lay eggs. On the pond, it's sometimes a little harder to find those eggs because if you've been to the zoo before, the pond has some areas that are pretty hidden, and they obviously want to try to find a spot that's hidden so that they feel secluded and could raise those babies. All right. And as I mentioned before, we've been participating in crane conservation since the 80s. And now it's an AZA managed species survival plan. So back in 2002 and 2003, we collected eggs from our cranes, and other AZA zoos did as well. Those white-naped crane eggs were sent to Russia, where they were incubated. Biologists at the Kingansky Nature Reserve in Russia hand-reared chicks from those eggs and released them to the wild. It's pretty amazing to think that eggs laid here at the Trevor Zoo may have resulted in new cranes flying in their native habitat in Eastern Asia. So now I want to show you some online resources about cranes. So first, I'm going to show you the International Crane Foundation website, which I've mentioned that organization a couple of times now. and their website is savingcranes.org. And all of these links and video clips that we show here will be in the description afterwards, so you can feel free to check them out. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see some resources here. Definitely look at those. But I want to point out the crane page. So that's what we're here about. We're here for, right? The crane. So when I bring that up, you'll see a field guide which lists the 15 species of cranes from around the world. And unfortunately, you'll notice that many of them are vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. And that's primarily because cranes spend their time in wetlands, and wetlands are very vulnerable to habitat destruction and change from humans, and also pollution. So it's unfortunately their main challenge. So if we click on the white-naped crane page here, you can get more information about the white-naped crane. Feel free to check out all the other species as well. And you can listen to them again. You heard some of their wonderful calls already, but you can listen to their calls. And what I want to point out is this range map, which I found really interesting. So it points out these two arrows show the two different populations of white-naped crane. So there are about 7,000 of them in the wild, and on the eastern side, more of the cranes use that flyway from their wintering range, that are the orange marks, to the green range, which is their breeding range. But on the left-hand side, you'll see the range, or the western range, for those birds, and their populations are lower. So they're about only 1,500 cranes in that population. So not doing quite as well, and most likely due to the pollution that they're working with in that area. So I also wanted to point out this really great story of Borzia, the white-naped crane, and this is a female crane that was tagged and had a transponder, so scientists could actually see where she goes. And it's a really interesting story how she was in the western fly zone and how she switched to go to the other wintering zone on the eastern side. So here shows the map. So definitely check out that story. I found it really interesting, and I think you will too. Lastly, I have a page here that is a publication from the Washington Post. It's entitled "The Crane Who Fell in Love with a Human," and it's written by Sadie Dingfelder about a white-naped crane named Walnut, who was imprinted with her keeper, Chris Crown, who was working at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, and they do a lot of work with cranes. And this article is about the imprinting and how she worked with him and how he worked with her, and we have a great clip to show you as well.
She would actually dance and do a lot of the courtship displays cranes do with each other. She would do it towards me, and I would try to imitate it with flapping my arms as wings and dancing around. And the main thing that she really liked that helped us bond was me helping her build a nest. Normally the male and female cranes would do it together, but I would bring her nesting material and she would actually purr, kind of make a purring noise.
Now that we've talked all about cranes, we are ready to take your questions. So we'll look down here and see what we have. Nan Greenwood asked why if they can fly, why don't they leave the pond? I think you may have heard right after you asked that question, I did talk a little bit about pinioning these birds, and if not, I'm happy to share it again. So all the birds that are on the pond that don't fly away are pinioned. Well, some of them actually choose to stay here year-round. There are wild geese and mallard ducks that stay year-round, but the cranes specifically are pinioned. So that means that the very tip of their feather or their wing, the feathers there were clipped when they were young, so that they'll never grow their primary feathers on that wing, and so they can't take off and fly away. So that's how we manage them in that space without them flying. And Sybil had a question about why the two sets of cranes are separated. Great question. It's because they would be very territorial if they were to have nests. So every breeding season they would need to be separated. Although our pond is really large, they're probably the area where they would want to lay their eggs is not as large as the whole pond area. So we needed to have a separate space for the other pair. So so they're kept in our Asia exhibit, which is fitting because that's where they're from. And Bill asked, are they endangered? The white-naped cranes are technically right now vulnerable. We consider them one of our endangered species, and that's one of those things where, depending on the organization that you look up at the time, an animal can go from endangered to vulnerable and back again. Their numbers are counted once a year, and a lot of organizations go off the IUCN red list numbers. So I think right now their numbers are probably increasing, so they're in the vulnerable category, but I don't know how close they are to tipping to the endangered, but they have been endangered in the past. So, we still consider them one of our endangered species. And Faith asked if there's any news about the zoo opening. I don't have any concrete answers for you. We are hoping to open soon. We're working with the county legislators on a plan to put out, and we're waiting for our local governments to tell us when we can open up. But we do have a plan that we're working on to open to the public and allow visitors. It will be in a different capacity, obviously less people, and with social distancing and masks and that sort of thing. But we are hopeful and excited to share the zoo again soon with you all. And definitely check out and follow our social media because we'll be posting things there. And I think that might have been all for the questions, or are there any more? Yeah. Okay, oh, that's all. So on that note, thank you for joining us for this episode of Live at the Trevor Zoo, and you can check out our previous episodes at our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com Trevor Zoo Millbrook. I wanted to make sure I got that right. And then also check our live streaming cameras that are streaming 24 hours a day at millbrook.org/Trevor Zoo Live. And we have one on our lemurs, our red pandas, and also our pond animals. So you will get a chance to see those cranes live if they're out and in front of the camera. And we hope that you come back next week and join us for our next Wednesday episode at 4 p.m. Thank you, be safe, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Bye.